But I'm going to give some updates on the investigation. But let me start off by saying to the community, thank you for the continued prayers for our injured officers. It is, like I said Friday, I'll talk about it a little bit more later. It is so heartening for me as a police chief in America's fourth largest city. Like I said Monday night, on the night that we had this incident, that the love affair between the police department and the community, the relationship with our activists, sometimes they're hotter than others, but by and large, they're really good. This is Houston, Texas. We showed the world what we're about during Harvey. We showed the world what we're about time and again, day after day. And I would tell the community, thank you for once again lifting us up. I'm a person of faith, and I believe that God answers prayers, and we're a prayerful community. And I've got some great news on our injured and wounded officers. The officer with the wounded knee or injured knee who had surgery remains hospitalized. He should be leaving pretty soon, but he's in good condition. And I think that that's a real blessing, and I'm happy to report that. One of our officers that was actually the case agent in this case that was listed critical condition, as you all recall, he has been upgraded to fair condition, which God is good. And again, I think, like I've said before, we really appreciate the prayers of our community, and they're being answered. The third officer that you all know, the family doesn't want us to get too specific, but let me just say this. From where we started to where we're at today, prayers for all three officers are being answered, and we just hope and pray and ask for the community's continued prayers. And again, I want to thank the community. I spoke to Mr. Tuttle's brother a little while ago. As you know, he's one of our suspects that was tragically killed in this incident. He's actually called me, left me a message, and I called him back as soon as I came back from my haircut that I desperately needed. But to the Tuttle family, like I said Tuesday, I didn't even know the names of the suspect on Monday because I had to leave that scene to get to the hospital to be with our officers and their families. Did not find out the name of the suspects until Tuesday when I got my update. And as you all know, it's been a pretty challenging week with a lot going on. But I got to speak with Mr. Tuttle, who lives in Austin, and that conversation, I was able to express my condolences to the family because, like I said on Tuesday at the hospital, regardless of what led up to the officer-involved shooting, regardless of, and I've always said this, you could have the worst gang member on the planet, murderer, that's still somebody's child. And I think if you all remember, I talked about that Tuesday morning, but it was really good to connect with him. And he's been in Austin since 1987, and I think he remembers me as his chief for almost 10 years there. What I told him is that to remember me as the police chief there, to what I stood for, an accountability, which means accountability for suspects, accountability for officers, and we just seek the truth. And at the end of the day, I made a promise to him, like I've always done for my officers and everyone when we have these deadly encounters, to seek the truth. Was just talking to my team, and like I told them, because there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there and people are going, running rampant. Let me just say this. We never run away from the truth. I've never ran away from the truth as a police chief, as a police leader, and I never will run away from the truth. Regardless of what that truth is at the end, when we finish these comprehensive investigations, our number one goal is always to find out the good, the bad, the ugly, and to be transparent, which is why we tweeted out the affidavit last night in the interest of transparency, because that's what builds community trust. And we always talk about relational policing, which talks about what we want to do to build that relationship. That in Houston, I'm not sure, all of a sudden you're a member of the media, you're here, Ashton's here, one of our activists, that he has his ups and downs with us sometimes, but I think that's That's my style, and I'm not going to run with it. If we can get to the truth, I'm not going to turn. So it felt good to talk to him, and to talk to him so he can talk to the rest of the family. And he says, "Hey, Chief, all we want is just to, it's hard to understand." But like I told him, for those that think, hey, his brother didn't have a criminal history, well, neither did the man that killed Dr. Honsacker, Hosconnect, excuse me, Dr. Hosconnect, as you all recall. The human mind is fragile. We know we have a lot of challenges in society. So what I asked for him that he committed to is keep an open mind. Don't take anything I say as 100%, but keep an open mind. Let us finish our investigation. I also told him some of the things as a brother, what we found so far, because he needs to put that out to his family, and we made that commitment. So that felt, again, that was a really good. Let me just tell you where we're at with our investigation. Our investigation continues. I want to provide you a little detail of what we've uncovered so far as to how we ended up at 7815 Harding. And I think I might have said Hardy at some point, and like I told, because he actually brought it up, I said, Mr. Tuttle, Monday night was a tough night for the city of Houston. It was a tough night for our community. They heard about 5 of their beloved police officers that had been shot. It was a tough night for a neighborhood that had this big shootout. And Hardy Tollway Harding, but I promise you that, as you saw on the affidavit, that we were at the right house based on our investigation to that point. So I will give you a brief overview of how we got to that point, and then we'll take it from there. On January 8th, 2019, patrol officers in the East Side Division of the Houston Police Department received a call and were dispatched for service at 7815 Harding regarding a suspicious person. The caller wanted to remain anonymous, but stated her daughter was inside the residence, quote, doing drugs, and they have a lot of guns in the residence. She stated there was also a female in the house, and I'm not going to say the name because, again, it's part of the investigation, and we want to keep this investigation tight. The caller stated she was at the residence, looking through the windows of the residence, but wanted again to stay anonymous. The call slip lists multiple times that the caller phoned into dispatch, repeating her complaint that her daughter was in the residence and there were guns and heroin. Officers arrived on the 8th of January at about 2017 p.m. Officers parked in the street in front of the residence, just east of the driveway. Officers did not observe anyone outside the residence. Officers walked in the street, back and forth in front of the house, and to see if this complainant would flag them down, and that did not occur. A female was walking down the street while talking on a phone. Officers asked her if she had called the police. She explained that she did not. Then into the phone, she stated we were right in front of that house in 815. She stated to whoever she was talking to, hey, the police are at the dope house. The officers called the anonymous caller on the phone number listed in the call slip. She stated she did not want to give any information because they were drug dealers and they would kill her. She wanted the officers to go into the house and get her daughter. One of the officers explained that the officers really cannot go into the house. At that time, this is the patrol officers, the officer wrote a detailed note within the call slip history to document their actions, what they had learned, and what they had done. Officer I almost said the name, I'm not going to say it right now because I don't want him inundated until this is all done. The officers then contacted Lieutenant Todd, which you all know from our narcotics division, who does a phenomenal job in terms of some of the work they've been doing up there. And the lieutenant provides a copy of the information and the notes prepared by the patrol officers to our case agent in this case, which is the individual that has been shot. Like I said, this is his 3rd time being shot in the line of duty, and told him to start working the location. Like I said the night of this incident, our greatest force multiplier is the people we serve, and the reason that we are as effective as we are in this big city with such an under-resourced police department is twofold. One, we have a great police department with the majority of our people are hardworking, honorable, phenomenal, committed, and like I like to brag on them, they don't make excuses, they make a difference. We are a department with 5,200 police officers in the city of 640 square miles. Contrast that to Chicago with about 278 miles and close to 13,000 police officers. The reason that we can reduce crime once again by over 10% in 2018 is we enjoy a phenomenal relationship with our community, including our activist community. It's just, this is Houston, and we'll talk about that later in a little bit. But we just have great community support and mutual respect. And again, it was the 911 call that began this, and we started our investigation. So on January, again, this happened on, the first call was on January 11th when we responded. Patrol provides the information to the lieutenant and narcotics lieutenant 3 days later orders the initiation of an investigation. On January 27th, the case agent utilized a confidential informant to make a controlled buy at the residence. You've all read the affidavit that led to that details that controlled buy, so I'm not going to reiterate it. I know that one of the outstanding questions by the community and by the media is, has that substance been tested? And the answer is yes, and it came back as heroin. It has been confirmed to be heroin. I'm sorry, what? Okay, has been confirmed to be heroin by the Houston Forensic Science Center, which is located above. So the search warrant was obtained, and we all know that on January 28th, the case agent presented a search warrant with an affidavit for the residence to Harris County Magistrate Gordon C. Markham II, the presiding judge of Houston Municipal Court number 13. He signed the warrant at about 13:37, and a tactical plan was put together. We already know that we had that execution of the search warrant. On the night of the incident and the search warrant, the investigators did find small amounts of what we now have confirmed through tests of marijuana and also of cocaine in the residence from that day. And we also recovered the firearms that I previously reported on. It's important because one of the things that a lot of people are asking is, hey, how about these dynamic search warrants? What are the pros and cons? Are they dangerous? And the answer is, anytime you enter a home, whether it's a dynamic or not, it's dangerous. I mean, there's no getting around it. Police work is dangerous. Which begs the question that I think that is important for the community, our community, because see, we're talking about Houston police. We're talking about Houston, Texas. We're talking about the Houston Narcotics Division. We're talking about our activists in Houston. We're talking about our relationship in Houston. We're interested in what's happening in our city. And so I thought it was important for us to take a quick look at our numbers on this in terms of what has been the total number. And this is preliminary, so I want to make sure that we double check the numbers. So don't hold me. I'm telling you right now, it's preliminary, but that is, we've already done a quick search of our data. And I asked the question because I think that that's a question that's out there to the community. Hey, are they dangerous? Answer, yes. Any type of execution of a search warrant is dangerous. And it's dangerous here, anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. That's just a fact. But it's important for people to know that the data that we collected at my direction was from a period of January 1st, 2014 through December 31st of 2018. I asked my folks to find out for me how many search warrants has the Narcotics Division executed between January 1st, 2014 and December 31st, 2018. And out of those total warrants, how many, remember, we're not counting 2019, so I want you guys, reporters, to get it right. We're talking up to the end of the year. of 2018, how many officer-involved shootings where we got engaged, either shot at a human being, discharged at a person. So in that time, between 1/1 of 14 and December 31st of 2018, the Narcotics Division executed 1,736 search warrants. That's 1,736 search warrants. As a result of those, during those search warrants, we had experienced one officer-involved shooting in a 5-year period with 1,736 search warrants. Ironically, on Monday, a day full of irony, we had been talking with the mayor and Mayor Turner and I had been talking to this community, reporting on violent crime and overall crime at the Houston Police Academy. If you remember, it was a day of irony. We announced the Tillman Fertitta tactical village that we broke ground on, which will be a huge investment of the community. Again, a community that loves its police department as much as the police department and the people that serve in this department love the community. They've invested over $10 million of privately raised funds to build this tactical village. That I will tell you, when it's done at the end of the year, of this year, our training is going to go from great to greater. And I think it's going to enhance the safety of the men and women that we lead in the community that we serve. Then we went and we talked about crime, if you recall that day, and I said that the three things that drive violent crime and murder specifically were gangs, domestic violence, and do you remember the third, everybody? The drugs. So when you're dealing with drug houses, when you're dealing with narcotics dealing, drugs and guns seem to come together, and those are the three drivers of murder. So that was a very ironic day. But I think it's very telling as to the training of the Houston Police Department Narcotics Division, the professionalism of the Houston Police Department Narcotics Division, and the constraint of the Houston Police Department Narcotics Division. When we look at our data, and against preliminary, but we'll take a deeper dive. When you look at 5 years worth of search warrants being executed for a total of 1,736 search warrants, and you have one officer-involved shooting against a human being. I don't think that that's indicative of a police department that is not doing some great work. If anybody wants to do the math, I already did it. That equates to 0.057%. Or you can say 0.06%. I think that's important for the community to know. Where do we go from here? We will continue our joint investigation with the District Attorney's Office. Our Special Investigations Unit that everybody that lives in the city knows we started in 2016, on November 30th, 2016, when I got sworn in after being selected by Mayor Turner and confirmed by the City Council. One of the first things that I did was take away the responsibility of investigating officer-involved shooting from homicide, because we want homicide to focus on getting people that are out here committing murders. And we wanted to get and train folks to investigate officers and officers' use of force and other allegations or crimes being committed by police officers. And if you talk to Kim Ogg, our district attorney, she's going to tell you, she considers that to be the model that she absolutely believes in. She loves the work they're doing, and I think it's a testament to Chief Dobbins, who's standing here, and his leadership, and the leadership of Chief Slinkard and Chief Finner and all of these folks, the work they're doing. They will continue the criminal investigation into the officer-involved shooting. And by the way, one of the things that I've told them is I want them to investigate everything that went into the development of the case, the purchase of the drugs, of what we now know to be heroin by the CI, and the submission of the affidavit, approval of the affidavit, and the execution of the search warrant. Is everybody clear on that? And that will be SIU with the assistance and supervision to an extent of the Harris County District Attorney's Office Civil Rights Division. Concurrently to that, we will have an investigation by the Houston Police Department Internal Affairs Division that will conduct an administrative inquiry into all the actions to make sure that all of our policies, procedures, and the training protocols are met. Let me just say this. Just because we're investigators doesn't mean we're going to find anything wrong. And just because we haven't found anything wrong at this point doesn't mean we're going to not end up at the end. It's a very extensive, long process. But at the end of the day, like I told Mr. Tuttle, we've taken the lives of 2 people, and we have to conduct extensive investigation. It's just what we do. It's it's the nature of our business. And so when we're done with that, we'll be able to report back to the community. Any questions? Anything that I left out up to this point from anybody? Okay, let me drink a little water because you all know I'm old.
Can you just address the issue about the lives of you 2 days and party and obviously the warrant says differently and all
the warrant says what?
There's I don't know if you're aware, but there's a gentleman who's been on YouTube a lot.
Look, listen. You're talking about conspiracy theorists. We deal with facts at the Houston Police Department. So
my question to you is, what do you say to members of the community? Because there are some out there who are tending to believe that.
You know what? There's people that believe the Earth is flat. I can't control what they think. What I can control is the quality of my investigation. What I can control is how extensive our investigation is, and what I can control at the back end is being transparent so people can decide for themselves. I can tell you, we've already pulled body-worn camera from the initial contact from patrol. We don't leave any stone unturned, and if you know anything about me as an investigator, as a leader, I'm a dogged SOB. I'd leave no stone unturned. And then, quite frankly, I think that, probably some of the consternation might be less to do with the actions of our narcotics division and more to do with some of the comments that were somewhat over the top by Joe Gamaldi. Because we've had, we used to average 45 officer-involved shootings or more in this city, and we're down to about 15 a year. And you know it because you've lived it. So we're doing all the right things in this city, in this department, including with our relational policing and our partnership with the community. But I'm not sure because I've been here now for 2 years, and this is the first time that we have this brouhaha. And quite frankly, I think a big part of it is because Joe Gamaldi's emotions got the best of him and just went off a little bit over the top over there, not a lot over the top, if you ask me. Which brings me to this: Joe Gamaldi doesn't run the Houston Police Department. I do. I'm the police chief, and I'm responsible for everything that goes on in the department. Everything that's good, everything that's bad, and everything that's ugly, and everything that's beautiful. The men and women you see before you here are the highest levels of this police department. There's only one missing, and actually she's moving. The reason she's moving is because her house flooded during Harvey, and she never left this building and this community, and her husband are moving into a new home because that's the level of commitment we have. But I want to start off this last portion of this press conference by making it really clear. A relationship between a police department and the community, including our activists, because you went a little bit over the top the other day. I think you would say that. We'll debate it later. You and I will talk about it later. And I'm not saying their name, but we'll talk about it later. But we have done a lot of great work here. And I'll be real honest with you, the HPLU's done a lot of great work here in terms of community building. I mean, they're a really good union. His emotions were frayed that night, and I don't know, I didn't even watch what he said after, but I want to make something really clear. I'm the police chief that was appointed by Sylvester Turner to be the chief of this city. And the people that lead this department and lead a department second to none is the men and women you see up here, the commanders that are out right now, the 44 commanders are out there right now doing their job, the lieutenants, the sergeants, and like I said earlier, ultimately the officers that, quite frankly, the very vast majority don't need much guidance because they're damn good. And I think that you all know that you see them during when we've had protests. They're good in the bad times and they're good in the good times. They're good. But having said that, I wanted this executive team up here because we have to remember that one incident, one person does not represent 5,200 sworn members in terms of what we're talking about. And I think, quite frankly, if Joe Grimaldi had to do a retake and maybe on some of the things that he said that night, or I don't know what he said since, but right now, it's important for people to know I lead the department. Let me finish. This is my press conference, and we'll talk later. That's the one thing I want to get out there right off the bat. Secondly, these men and women here work tirelessly leading the folks that we lead, and quite frankly, our men and women work tirelessly building the relationship that we've built. And so I would urge people to do two things. Number one, we should not paint activists with broad brushes, and our department should not be painted with a broad brush because of one guy's comments or whatever comments he's made since. Because ultimately, that's one person, one opinion. We should be judged by our body of work as leaders and our body of work as officers and support staff. And I think that when you look at the body of work of this police department and you look at it critically, you're going to say, it's a good police department. So I want to remind the community of the facts that sometimes people don't know what the HPOU is and what the HPD is, and sometimes they put them two together. Their labor, we are the police department. And the police department is 5,200 professionals plus another 1,200 support, and the people that lead them are here. And so I'm going to close with, on that issue, that I've already reached out to my activist community. Actually, they've reached out to us as well. We'll be meeting sometime next week to continue our relationships. Like I've always said, we don't run away from activists. And let's be clear. We want people to criticize us when it's appropriate, but there's a difference between being an activist and being an anarchist, right? An activist brings to the forefront concerns, scrutinizes a police department, calls out a police department. We support that, and we never back away from that. I've always run towards activists. But anarchists are those that would say, hey, all cops need to die. Do you understand the difference? And let me just remind people that in our city, we have a tremendous working relationship with our activists. Because quite frankly, in this city, unlike some places, we have activists, not anarchists. And I think that speaks volumes as to the relationship and the work of the police department. Am I making sense to everybody? So I just wanted to make that distinction. And I want to just say that I look forward to actually meeting with our activists. Because I'll be honest with you, guess what? Anarchists don't meet with the police chief. They don't. The anarchists are throwing bricks and they're burning down cities. That's not what we had yesterday. That's not what we're going to have tomorrow, because that's not the relationship that we have here in the city of Houston. So for the anarchists that might be out there, I'm here to tell you, don't come to this city trying to cause problems, because what you're going to meet is not just our police officers saying we're not going to tolerate anarchist behavior. You're going to meet our activists. They're going to say, hey, go be the fool somewhere else. We're not going to let you mess with our cities. Am I making sense? Yeah. It's a very distinctive, different. So when it comes to HPOU and the police department, we're not one and the same. We have different roles, but we lead the police department. We are the ones that hold people accountable. We are the ones that pick up and help, with their help, quite frankly, when our officers need us. But let's be real clear. We have no relationship's perfect, and relationships are work, but we have a tremendous history throughout our history, and I think if you ask Joe, he'll tell you the same thing, of working very collaboratively with our activist community. And quite frankly, we don't really have anarchists here, because that's not what Houston, Texas is all about. This city continues to remain one of the most amazing places. I think it's one of the best kept secrets, not too much of a best kept secret, thanks to the Super Bowl and other issues. The reason that we don't have the issues that other cities have had historically is because in the last 10 years, and I can tell you for certain the last couple of years, I can't remember. I think ever since the Super Bowl, we really haven't had any protests against the police department, and we've had officer-involved shootings. We've actually had 2 officers that we got rid of that were charged criminally for officer-involved shootings because we work collaboratively. And I would just hope that our activists, that we all take a step back, take a deep breath. If you've got an issue with something that was said, deal with it directly. But let's put away the broad brushes, because we know when we use broad brushes, we end up not building bridges. We end up not building relationships. We end up burning them. So with that, I want to just thank our executive team, our investigators that I'm telling you are working tirelessly. It's going to take several weeks to get through all the investigation. But I want to close with saying that our commitment, as always, is to seek the truth, leave no stone unturned, and to come back and report, just like we did with every investigation when there's an issue, just like we did it with the FBI investigation, as you recall, that I came back and reported back, and I look forward to the conversations. Any questions?
I just need you to clarify 2 things that you've already said. One is this stat that you spitted out, the 1,700 search warrants executed in the last 4 years.
No, that's not right.
1,736.
Okay, that's exactly what I said.
In that, can I add an asterisk to not paint with a broad brush to be more accurate? Do they all get executed the same way? Would these 700 be all undercover? Would you have swap back? Would there be any reason that one would be more?
You're not listening.
You know what I mean?
Those are 1,736 search warrants executed by the Narcotics Division. Okay?
They're always undercover.
1,736 by the Narcotics Division. And the way it's, a lot of them will be no-knock if appropriate, and some will be different. If I didn't say it was SWAT executing those search warrants, it was the Narcotics Division search warrants.
And they're always undercover?
Yeah, they don't show up in uniform, but they do show up with plenty of gear that identifies them as police officers, including patrol officers that are out in front of the house. And again, one of the things that is part of our administrative investigation is where were the uniformed officers, all the things that go into evaluating the execution of the search warrant. What else?
A couple questions about the warrant. One, can you just outline again the weapon that was uncovered from the home? How many and what was it specifically? The warrant does say that there appeared to have been a 9mm gun, at least based on the observation of the CI who made the purchase of the heroin. The second question.
I don't have the list of firearms. I already released that the night of the incident.
Okay.
Or the next morning, I think it was. I don't have it with me in front of me.
It doesn't include the 9mm, so.
Well, it is what it is. I already gave you what I have, so I don't know if I had a 9mm, and I don't remember the list.
Will we know that for sure, though, down the line? Any confirmation as to what that may be? These are just questions that folks have reached out to.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, guys, let me just say this. We put out what we know when we know it.
Sure.
And unlike other police departments, I actually put out what I know when I know it. If something comes up that changes, we'll let you know, but I've already given you, I don't have it with me, I apologize.
Okay,
so you might want to look at, I think we put that out on Tuesday morning at the hospital.
You did?
Yeah.
That's where I got the initial.
Yeah, that we put that at the hospital. But then again, remember, you're dealing with the CI. Right. So, what might be a 9mm might end up being a pistol. Who knows? That's part of our investigation.
Chief,
what else?
Can you expand a little bit on this one officer-involved shooting that you mentioned among the...
No, we're not here to talk about that officer-involved shooting, and we're not going to reinvestigate it. You're talking about the one out of all those?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to talk about it.
I don't know if you know yet why they chose afternoon time to go in.
I don't. That's part of the investigation. Remember, you have to remember that we've got the case agent that just went from critical to fair condition. So that'll be part of the investigation. Again, listen, officers, when they execute search warrants or when they're doing police work, are making split-second decisions in many cases. And then we spend weeks, if not months, if not years, scrutinizing every piece of that. I don't think there are too many professions, I can't think of any profession that is scrutinized more than the law enforcement profession. So, no, I don't have that yet, but we always look at that. So, yes, sir.
There's been some talk about why nobody games. Is it standard policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's remember this about body-worn cameras. I think people are forgetting that body-worn cameras are still a pretty new technology. I think because when they were starting to come to the forefront, we had issues like Ferguson. We had some incidents that really led up to a lot of really bad outcomes in terms of community policing relations. And I used to say it at the time in Austin. There was a rush by a lot of departments to go out and purchase body-worn cameras. I've been reading reports lately that some departments are actually starting to get rid of their programs. I don't know if you've seen those media reports. We actually, about 5 weeks ago at executive staff, and it's a resource issue for us, right? We've been deploying them over the last 2.5, 3 years. We've been deploying them. For us, our priority, think about it, let me just make sure that we understand what our priority was. 1,736 warrants were executed by the Narcotics Division since 1/1/14 and one officer involved shooting. So our priority has been to get body-worn cameras into the hands of the people that are most prone and most likely to be involved in a use of force or response to resistance incident, whether it's or a complaint, which includes rudeness or punching, tasing, whatever. And let's face it, the majority of the incidents involve patrol. So that's been our priority. About 5 weeks ago, I directed Dr. Poore, Diane Poore, who's in our Research and Plan Division, to start looking, because now we're looking at what's the next iteration of our program. Where do we go from here? And I'll be honest with you guys, because I've already told my team, when we are going into somebody's home, the likelihood that we won't land on we're going to have body-worn cameras is pretty slim for search warrants. I mean, it is what it is. Because most of the times we're going to be doing the right things, and we want to capture that. We want to capture what we did, so this conspiracy theorists, and some of them that still think the earth is flat or don't believe that some hijackers came in from the Middle East and actually the government blew up the World Trade Center. I can't control those people. But we're probably going to land there, but I'm not going to say that 100% until we finish our research. And understand something else on the national level. I don't know if you guys remember, but I'm now the new president of the Major City Chiefs Association, which represents the 69 largest police departments in the country. On the national level, we started the conversation that once we make a decision, the departments make a decision to go with body-worn cameras on entries, and now they're part of a federal task force, and the federal government agencies don't wear body-worn cameras. What does that do? What impact will that have on our participation? Not necessarily in the task forces, but in our participation in a joint agency search warrant, where you might have different members of different organizations in a stack that train together because they're a task force. So that conversation for us to take for the further development of our program began about 5 weeks ago, the research, and we will probably have more information, I would say, on that probably in the next 4 to 8 weeks, and with the final decision probably within the next 8 weeks on where we're headed. I have a meeting of the Major City Chiefs, my very first one as the president in February, joint meeting with the major county sheriffs, where we will be having that conversation, because I also want to see from the rest of the top leadership of law enforcement in the United States what their perspectives are. But at the end of the day, we're going to do what we think is right for our city here in Houston. That we've done a lot of good work, and we need to keep moving forward. And hopefully Joe and the HPOU, who, if you know they've done a lot of good work over the years, that they'll go back and remind the people of Houston and work on that release. But that's their job. It's not my job.
Are you worried though that they shut some damage?
You know what? Just look. I have any time that you get that emotional, when you let your emotions get the best of you, I've done it. I've said things at press conferences that I've regretted, because in the heat of the moment you say stuff. But I can tell you we've got a lot of phone calls from the community. I've gotten phone calls, and it's not. I got news for anybody that thinks that has not harmed us. Regardless of intent, the impact has had has impacted the standing of the police department. But what's important, and when we go back out, HPOU is not 5,200 cops. HPOU is not CHPD, and HPOU doesn't lead the police department, isn't responsible for the overall and day-to-day operations of the police department. It's the men and women you see here, the 44 commanders, the lieutenants, the sergeants, and ultimately the officers. And lastly, one incident, one person does not represent the collective opinions, hearts, or minds of the Houston Police Department. I will close with saying, and I'm going to go to Spanish. I'm done in English. I'm going to close with saying, like I said before, I said it Monday night, the love affair of this police department, between this police department, between 5,200 sworn and 1,200 support staff members, a police department that is reflective of the most diverse community in the United States, a police department that is the minority majority in terms of its makeup, like the community that we serve. As a matter of fact, my recollection is out of the narcotics agents that all were involved in this operation Monday, they were all either black or brown, including the 2 African American officers that were critically injured. With the exception, the only one I can remember that wasn't black or brown was a sergeant that had to get knee surgery. We are the community, and the community is us. Sir Robert Peel said that over a century ago, and no truer words have ever been spoken. And I think when you look at the history of the Houston Police Department, the modern history, because there's some ugly history here too, like there is in policing, I don't think that no police department and no community reflects the words of Sir Robert Peel more than the Houston Police Department and the people of Houston. So the community, thank you for the continued prayers. We ask that you continue to work with us, to our activists. I've got to be in D.C. I've been summoned to talk about, I've actually talked to Senator Cornyn. I've talked to Sheila Jackson-Lee and other members of the Congress to talk about gun policy and how we can reduce gun violence in our community. So I probably will have that, I hope to have that meeting on Thursday. But if it needs to be sooner, I've got an entire team that can meet, but I just don't want to be in that meeting. I hope to have it sometime Thursday to continue the work.
¿Qué es lo que motivó que fueran los policías que se pidiera esta orden de cateo en este domicilio de Mario?
¿Cómo entramos ahí?
No, nos decía que ya había una persona que llamó que porque su hijo estaba en la casa.
Sí. ¿Quieres que te diga en español? Bueno, lo que ocurrió, nuestra investigación continúa, pero estoy muy contento para decir que nuestros oficiales siguen en la batalla, pero tenemos gran esperanza y le queremos dar las gracias a la comunidad por sus oraciones, por su apoyo, por su amor y por la confianza que seguimos ganarlos. Pero esa investigación empezó porque el día 8 de enero tuvimos una llamada al 911 y nuestros patrulleros de la patrulla fueron a una llamada que en esa casa donde fue este incidente, una señora reportó que su hija estaba adentro de la